There is a kind of love that doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't slam doors or throw things across the room. It doesn't scream in parking lots or send long angry texts at 2 in the morning. It just stays, quietly, stubbornly, faithfully. It stays even when it shouldn't. It stays even when every rational part of your mind is whispering. No, not whispering, screaming, that it's time to go. That kind of love is the love I know best. That kind of love is the love I was born with. Because I am a Pisces woman. And for a very long time, I believed that loving someone through their worst was the most beautiful thing a person could do. I want to tell you something that took me years to understand. Something that nobody told me when I was young and romantic and full of hope. Forgiving someone is not the same as healing. Staying is not the same as strength. And love, real love, should never require you to disappear inside of it. I learned all of that the hard way. I learned it over 3 forgivenesses, 3 chances, 3 moments where I chose him over myself. And I want to tell you exactly what happened. Not because I want your sympathy, but because I know there is someone out there right now, lying in bed in the dark, staring at the ceiling, asking herself, should I forgive him one more time? And I want her to hear this first. His name doesn't matter. What matters is how he made me feel in the beginning. And in the beginning, he made me feel like I had finally been seen. I had spent most of my life feeling like I was too much. Too emotional. Too sensitive. Too deep. The kind of girl who cried at sunsets and felt the weight of other people's sadness as if it were her own. I used to apologize for it constantly. I'm sorry, I'm just a lot. I'm sorry, I feel things too deeply. I'm sorry for being exactly who I am. And then he came along and he looked at me, really looked at me, and he said, I have never met anyone like you. You feel everything so completely. That's not a flaw. That's a gift. I want you to understand what those words did to a girl who had spent her entire life being told she was too sensitive. Those words were not just kind. They were transformative. They reached into the center of me and rearranged something. He didn't just like me. He celebrated the exact thing I had always been ashamed of. So yes, I fell. I fell completely and without reservation. The way only a Pisces woman can fall, with her whole soul, her whole future. Her whole self placed carefully in someone else's hands like an offering. And for a while, it was everything I had dreamed of. We stayed up until 4 in the morning talking about things that mattered. He knew my fears before I said them out loud. He held me when I cried and never once made me feel small for it. I thought, this is it. This is the person I was waiting for. This is the love that makes sense of everything that came before. I should have paid more attention to the small moments. The times he went quiet when I needed words. The times he turned away when I reached for him. The times I noticed something shift in his eyes and told myself I was imagining it. I was a Pisces. I was intuitive. I felt things before they happened. But sometimes, when you love someone enough, you learn to silence your own intuition. Because the alternative, knowing the truth, is too painful to face. The first time I found out, it wasn't dramatic. There was no lipstick on a collar. No incriminating text message discovered by accident. It was just a feeling. A slow, creeping certainty that something was wrong. And then a name. A name that came up once too often, attached to a story that changed details each time he told it. I asked him directly. And I watched his face carefully when he answered. And I knew. He denied it for 3 days. And then, on the 4th day, he sat across from me at our kitchen table and he told me the truth. Not all of it. Just enough. And I remember sitting there, very still, while the world rearranged itself around me. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just hurt the relationship. It reaches back in time and retroactively hurts every happy memory you've ever had. Every kiss, every late-night conversation, every moment where you felt safe and chosen, all of it becomes suspect. All of it gets contaminated. You sit there and you think, was any of it real? Was I real to him at all? He cried. He told me he didn't know why he did it. He told me he loved me. He told me I was the only person who had ever truly understood him and that what happened meant nothing and that he was terrified of losing me. And the woman who feels everything too deeply, I believed him. Because I wanted to. Because the thought of starting over, of losing the person who had made me feel seen for the first time, was more frightening to me than the truth. Sitting on the kitchen table between us, that was the first forgiveness. I want you to understand what forgiving someone costs a Pisces woman. It is not a simple thing. It is not a decision made once and then filed away. It is a decision made every single day, sometimes every single hour, for weeks and months afterward. Every time he picked up his phone and turned slightly away from me, I forgave him again. Every time he came home late and gave me an explanation that was almost right, I forgave him again. Every time I woke up at 3 a.m. with my heart racing and the doubt so thick I could barely breathe, I chose to forgive him again. Because that is what love is, right? That is what I had always been told. Love endures. Love is patient. Love does not keep a record of wrongs. I had built my entire understanding of love on a foundation of selfless devotion, and I was not willing to let that go. Even if it was slowly hollowing me out, I threw myself into rebuilding us. I read books about trust and communication. I suggested couples counseling. I made myself softer, more present, more available. I told myself that if I could just love him better, more completely, more unconditionally, then he would never need to look elsewhere. I told myself the problem was fixable. I told myself we were fixable. What I didn't tell myself, what I couldn't afford to consider, was that I was the only one rebuilding. That while I was working overtime to save something, he was merely waiting for the discomfort to pass. There is a particular cruelty in that dynamic that I could not see from inside it. I was carrying the weight of both of us, and I called it love. The months passed. Things got better on the surface. We laughed again. We made plans. I started to let myself hope. Maybe we had survived it. Maybe this was one of those relationships that came out stronger on the other side of a crisis. I had heard of that happening. I wanted so badly to be one of those stories. The second time I found out by accident. A notification on his screen. Just words. Just a few words. But the kind of words that don't have innocent explanations. I remember the exact moment. I remember the light in the room, the sound coming from the television in the background, the way my stomach dropped before my brain had fully processed what I was reading. My body knew before I did. My body had always known. This time I didn't stay still. This time, something cracked open inside me and all of that carefully managed grief and rage and self-abandonment came flooding out. I said things I had never said to anyone. I cried the kind of crying that isn't pretty or dignified, the kind that is just pure, raw animal pain. And when it was over, when I had emptied myself out completely, I looked at him. And I waited, and he said, "I am not okay. I have not been okay for a long time. And I need help. Real help. Will you give me a chance to get it?" A Pisces woman hears a person say, "I am not okay," and she does not hear weakness. She hears a call. She hears someone drowning, and she reaches down without thinking about whether she might drown too. Because that is who she is. Because that is the thing she was built for. She is the one who stays. She is the one who holds. She is the one who loves people through their darkest places without asking whether she will make it out herself. That was the second forgiveness. The next year was the hardest of my life. Not because he was cruel. He was actually for the first time trying. He went to therapy. He was more present, more honest, more careful with me. And I watched all of it and felt almost nothing. Because something had changed in me. Some essential warmth had gone quiet. I smiled at the right moments. I said the right things. But inside, there was a distance I didn't know how to close. I tried to talk to him about it. I told him that even though I had chosen to stay, a part of me felt like it hadn't come back yet. That I was waiting for myself to feel safe again, and the waiting was exhausting. He listened. He held my hand. He said, "I know I hurt you. I am going to spend the rest of my life making that right." And I wanted to feel something when he said that. I really did. The thing that nobody tells you about being in the healing phase of a broken relationship is how deeply lonely it is.
You are surrounded by someone who loves you, and yet you have never felt more alone.
Because the version of you that loved them freely and without armor, that version is gone. And the person you are now is grieving her quietly, every single day, while also trying to be present and forgiving and forward-looking. It is an impossible thing to sustain. I started losing weight without trying. I stopped sleeping well. I would sit in rooms full of people and feel completely invisible. My friends told me I seemed distant. My mother asked if I was okay. I told everyone I was fine, just tired. Just going through something. Just healing. But the truth was, I was disappearing. Slowly, quietly. In the way that only a Pisces woman can disappear, not all at once, but piece by piece, like light fading at the end of a day. And I was so focused on holding the relationship together that I didn't notice it happening until I was almost entirely gone. The third time, I almost didn't care. That is what frightens me most when I think about it now. I almost didn't care. I found out through a mutual friend, said carefully, with the kind of gentleness that told me. She had been sitting on the information for a while and had finally decided I needed to know. I sat in my car for 45 minutes before going back inside. I did not cry. I did not feel rage. I felt something that was much worse than either of those things. I felt tired, a bone-deep, soul-level exhaustion that had nothing to do with sleep. The kind of tired that comes from spending years trying to hold together something that was never going to hold. The kind of tired that arrives when you have finally run out of ways to pretend. When I walked back inside and told him what I knew, he started talking immediately. Explanations, apologies, the same words, slightly rearranged, that I had heard twice before. And I stood there and I listened. And I noticed something extraordinary happening inside me. A quiet, not the quiet of someone suppressing emotion. The quiet of someone who has reached the end of something and finally knows it. That was the third forgiveness. Except it wasn't really. Because this time, I was not forgiving him. I was releasing him. There is a difference that took me a long time to understand. Forgiving someone means choosing to continue. Releasing someone means choosing yourself. I did not yell. I did not throw things. I did not say the long, devastating things I had rehearsed in my head for months. I simply said, I cannot do this anymore. And I left the room. And then, eventually, I left the house. And then, eventually, I left entirely. The leaving was not the hard part. The hard part was what came after. The silence of a life that suddenly had all this empty space in it. The muscle memory of reaching for someone who was no longer there. The strange grief of mourning a relationship that had caused you so much pain, because no matter how much it hurt, it had still been the center of your world. I want to be honest with you about the nights. The nights were very difficult. I would lie in bed and cycle through every version of the story, looking for the moment where I could have done something differently. Could I have loved him better? Was I too much? Not enough? Was there a version of me that was more patient, more understanding, more forgiving, that could have saved what we had? Pisces women are very good at this particular form of self-torture. We replay everything. We examine every detail. We take on blame that was never ours to carry. But slowly, very slowly, another voice started to emerge. A quieter voice, a kinder voice. A voice that sounded a little like the girl I had been before I learned to apologize for existing. And that voice said, you were not too much. You were exactly enough. You gave everything you had to give, and it still was not enough because it was never about what you gave. You cannot love someone into becoming who you need them to be. You can only love them. And sometimes, loving them means walking away. I started therapy. Not for him, not for the relationship, but for the first time in my life, purely for myself. I started learning about the patterns that had led me there. The way I had been taught that love meant sacrifice. The way I had confused devotion with self-abandonment. The way my deep capacity for empathy had been weaponized against me without either of us fully realizing it. I started learning the difference between loving someone and losing yourself in them. My therapist asked me something in our third session that I have thought about almost every day since. She asked me, When was the last time you did something purely because it made you happy, not because it helped someone else?
Not because it kept the peace, not because it made you easier to love, but simply because it brought you joy?
And I sat there in that chair in that quiet office, and I could not answer her. I opened my mouth and nothing came out, because I could not remember. I had been so busy being what everyone else needed that I had completely lost track of what I wanted. And that realization, that simple, devastating realization, broke something open in me that needed to be broken. It is a distinction that no one teaches Pisces women. We are celebrated for our depth, our sensitivity, our boundless capacity to feel. But we are not often taught where the boundary is. We are not often told that the ocean of love inside us is ours first, that we are allowed to hold some of it for ourselves. We grow up hearing that our sensitivity is beautiful, and it is, but we are rarely taught how to protect it. We are rarely taught that a gift can be given away so freely that eventually there is nothing left to give. I learned to sleep again. I learned to eat meals that I cooked only for myself and to find that peaceful instead of lonely. I learned to sit with my own company without the constant background noise of someone else's needs. I learned that silence was not something to be filled, that I did not need to earn my place in a room by being useful or nurturing or endlessly understanding. I learned to walk into a space and simply exist in it, without scanning it immediately for what was wrong or who needed something, or how I could make myself indispensable. I learned what it felt like to choose myself. And I want to tell you, it felt terrifying. It felt like standing at the edge of something vast and stepping off. Because when you have spent your whole life placing yourself second, choosing yourself feels like a radical and frightening act. It feels selfish, even when it is the most necessary thing you have ever done. There were days when the guilt was so heavy, I could barely move through it. Days when I second-guessed everything, when I convinced myself that I had given up too easily, that I was the problem, that a better woman would have stayed and fixed it. Those days were brutal, but they passed. And on the other side of each one, I found a little more of myself waiting. I am telling you this because I know you. Not you specifically, but I know the version of you who is reading this at 11 o'clock at night,
Or watching this in the dark because you couldn't sleep.
or sitting with a feeling in your chest that you can't quite name, but that has been living there for a long time. I know the version of you who has forgiven someone more times than you can count,
Who has rebuilt yourself around someone else's damage.
who has loved so completely and so selflessly that you have misplaced yourself somewhere along the way. You are not weak. Please hear that first. Choosing to forgive someone, choosing to stay, choosing to believe in someone's capacity to change, those are not failures. They are expressions of the most profound kind of love that exists. The Pisces woman does not love in halves. She loves entirely or not at all. And that is not a flaw to be corrected.
That is a sacred thing. But here is what I needed someone to tell me.
And what I am telling you now, your love is not a resource that exists purely for other people's use. You are not a well that others can draw from indefinitely. You are a person. You have needs that matter. You have a self that deserves to be protected.
And sometimes, not always, but sometimes the most loving thing you can do is not forgive one more time. Not forgive one more time.
But finally, gently, irrevocably,
Choose yourself. The right person, the one you are actually meant to build something with,
will not require you to disappear in order to stay. They will not ask you to carry what they should be carrying themselves. They will not need you to love them so completely that you forget to love yourself.
The right person will look at all of that feeling inside you, and they will hold it carefully.
They will be worthy of it. You deserve that. Not someday.
Not after you have suffered enough, or healed enough, or become a better version of yourself.
Right now.
Exactly as you are.
You deserve someone who sees your depth and rises to meet it.
I want to tell you where I am now.
Not because the story has a perfect ending, but because I want you to know that there is an after. There is a life that exists on the other side of walking away. And it is quieter than the life I had before, and in some ways smaller, and in other ways, in the ways that matter, immeasurably larger. I have my mornings back. I have the particular piece of a coffee made slowly, without rushing to meet someone else's timeline.
I have the strange gift of knowing myself again, knowing what I want, what I need, what I will and will not accept. I have friendships that I had let go quiet because I had no energy left over from the relationship, and I have been tending those friendships back to life, and finding in them a warmth that I had forgotten was possible. I still feel everything deeply. I still cry at sunsets. I still feel the weight of other people's sadness as if it were my own. I am still completely and entirely a Pisces woman. But I am a Pisces woman who has learned something essential, that the depth of feeling inside me is not a burden to be managed, or a weakness to be apologized for, or a resource to be offered up to whoever happens to reach for it. It is mine.
It has always been mine.
And I am learning